Hi and welcome. Today we're going to make a 5-minute daisy ring. Really simple. You need a hammer and a block, just 6 inches of wire. I'm working with 1mm or 18 gauge wire today, and I'm also going to be using my memory wire finishing pliers. You could use a round nose pliers. Let's head down to the board and we'll create this project together. Cute little daisy ring made in about 5 minutes, and you're only using a 6-inch length of wire. So I'm working with raw copper, and this is around about 6 inches of 1mm or 18 gauge. Once you've had a go at this design, you could absolutely use a heavier wire if you wanted to. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to make sure that that's nice and smooth and warm, and we're going to create 5 petals for this design. So I'm going to use the smaller side of my memory wire finishing pliers, which is a 2mm pin, and I'm just going to create a little pear drop shape. Bring the wire back towards itself so that you get this little pear. And we're going to go in with some fine tipped pliers. I'm going to use my bent chain nose pliers because they're really good to teach with. So if I grip the longer part of the wire and draw that tail back in the same direction, make sure everything's nice and flat, and then just softly pinch up that inner little hairpin. Not too tight, just a little bit. What we're going to do then is to use that same 2mm or small pin on the memory wire finishing pliers to generate that second petal. So I'm going to draw that all the way back towards the middle of that flower design. Bring in those pliers once more and chase that wire back in the opposite direction again. So we're going to create 5 petals. Each time we create a petal, we're going to pinch very gently the inner hairpin, leaving the outer hairpin nice and chubby. Bring in those pliers again. If you don't have access to the memory wire finishing pliers, then you can use your multi-step bell making pliers, or indeed some round nose pliers. It's very easy to just pop a little bit of permanent marker onto the pliers to identify the size of the petal. Let's bring those bent chain nose pliers back in, push the wire in the opposite direction, and we're about to make our 4th petal. So very softly, making sure everything is nice and flat, pinching up that inner hairpin just ever so gently. Let's create that 4th petal. All the way around, back towards the middle. Bring the tip of the pliers back in and chase that wire out again. If that doesn't line up perfectly, you can give it a little bit of a wiggle just to get it to sit where you want it to, and then just pinch that inner hairpin ever so gently. Let's bring in those pliers once more. You can rotate those around until you get a similarly sized petal. And then for the last time, we're going to take the wire outwards from the centre of that design. So I'm not going to pinch the wire this time. All I need to do now is to bring those petals around to create the little daisy shape. Now, because I'm working with raw copper, it's relatively easy. If you're working with a firmer wire, you just need to grip the tip of each of those petals and just gently, very softly prise it apart so that you get an evenly spaced flower. Once you've got each of the 5 petals into position, you can decide how much you need to straighten up the stem of the daisy. Making sure that's all nice and flat and you're happy with how your daisy looks, we're now going to commit that shape to the block with our hammer. Now, when you're hammering down on an open wired form like this, it will spring apart from the last section of wire that joins to the stem, from the first part of the wire that is just free and easy. So you can just grip those 2 pieces side by side. Whilst you hammer down on the 3 middle petals, but you will notice that these do open up slightly, so it's just a case of pushing them back into position, and then we're going to just hammer gently on the 2 outer petals, making sure that we don't hammer on the stem that's coming away on the straight line. So I'm just going to cover that up. And then hammer down. What I'm going to do now is to just close up that daisy and try to pinch the stem and that first petal so that I can hammer the last petal without hammering the stem. Using a hammer whilst your fingers are on the block, if you hold your project like this, you're far more likely to damage yourself. But if you hold your fingers down, it's much like cutting when you're shredding vegetables on a chopping block. If you hold your fingers down like so, you're far less likely to injure yourself. So just take your time. Once you've got your daisy into position, I'm just going to give it one final little wiggle and make sure that everything is closed up. Another thing to be mindful for is to make sure that the first petal is fully closed. We don't want anything to catch on your skin, so just grab that first little section and push that into the middle of the design. Once everything is good and in position, I'm going to give a really decent warm through to the stem of the flower. Now I'm going to use my working ring stick. I have about 5 ring sticks. One is for clients to size their rings on, and it is absolutely immaculate. The other 4 are in various states of disrepair. So this has been hammered, dropped and worked very, very hard for 16 years. There's a mark on it to show where my favourite ring size is. So it's always worth having more than one ring stick or ring mandrel if you prefer, so that you can keep one beautiful and tidy and one that's a bit of a workhorse. So this is my workhorse ring mandrel, and what I'm going to do is to just super warm that wire through, identify the size of ring that I want to make, pop my mandrel into position, and then I'm going to start bending that wire around. I'm not going to do a complete loop just yet. I'm just working to get the first part of that ring size into position. Once I've got an idea of the ring size I'm after, I'm going to warm through that tail of wire, and I'm going to identify which petal is opposite the stem. So that's why I've gone for an odd number of petals. If you wanted to stuff 7 petals in there, you can, but we're looking to have one that is opposite the stem. So odd numbers are best. Warm that wire through and then just poke that tail up inside the opposite petal. So you might need to just open that out slightly, slide back onto the chosen position on your mandrel, and then just draw that tail through. So the way that I tend to do this is to get everything into position. It's a little bit wonky at the moment, but it will all come good in a moment. And then I'm just going to push down on the daisy whilst I bring that tail of wire into position to ensure that my daisy fits exactly where I want it to. Now there will be a straight piece on your daisy. We will adjust that in just a moment with the hammer, but for right now I'm going to take the assembly off the mandrel and just softly bend over that middle petal so that it will form around the finger and around the mandrel. You can do half of the other petals as well if you want to, just to give that a little bit of help. Let's slide that back into position, and then I'm going to push that down onto the ring mandrel and draw the wire firmly in the opposite direction. So if I take this off the mandrel for you, you'll see that the wire has travelled inside the opposite petal and it's made a nice sharp bend through that petal, and it's now coming back in the opposite direction. Now this is a really rustic, quick make design. If you want to, you can turn this into a spiral and have it sitting over the face of your ring. We're going to go for the absolutely rapid variation today. So I'm going to trim away, and I'll just show you how long that is when it's off the mandrel. So you can see it's just coming back towards the edge of the wire there, the side of the ring. And what we're going to do is just make sure that everything closes up nice and neatly. And then I'm going to pinch the wire so that it sits back on the side of the ring. Now you'll see the wire is a little bit janky. The reason that it's gone into those funny shapes is, it's very, very warm here today in the UK, but as we hammer down on this part of the wire, that work hardening travels along a little bit. So what we're going to do is to pop it onto our working ring mandrel like so, and help that to fit properly. I really am tapping very gently just to get a really nice rounded shape. So if I remove that from the ring stick, we're going to just take our time, and you may like to let's move that out of the way a second. Just using your pliers, we're going to adjust the angle of the ring shoulder so that it smoothly moves round in a lovely circular form. Now, these are flat facing pliers and you can perform miracles with them, because where we've got that slightly janky angle there, I'm going to press across like so, and it's just going to make everything a little bit more perfect. And it seems opposite to how you ought to use these pliers, but it really does make a difference. So once you've got a slightly more rounded ring to work with, you can pop that back onto your working mandrel and give that a lovely tap, just to make sure that all of the petals sit down flush on your mandrel, and in that way they'll sit down more flush on your hand. So let's just slide that off for a second. You will obviously need to make small adjustments here and there. Like I think I want to pinch that up slightly. I want to move that inwards slightly. And again, I will pop that back onto the ring mandrel to make sure that this sits exactly how I want it to. One of the things that you can do to enhance the comfort of this ring is to just bring that outwards slightly, pop it back on the mandrel, and then give it a tap. So we've got our daisy ring to fit the size. Once you're happy that that is lovely and round, try it on the finger that you're looking for it to be worn on, or try it on your client's ring stick size. And then once you're happy with the shape and form of it, what I tend to do is just pop the shank of the ring onto the block like so, and quite softly tap that down. What I'm doing here is I'm not adjusting the shape of the wire. Often when I'm hammering, I'm flattening from a round to an oval, sometimes even a ribbon shape. But in this instance, all I'm doing is hardening that wire so that the ring will then keep its shape. So there you have your literally 5-minute daisy ring. You can take a little longer if you want to get the perfect petals, or you can make that really, really quickly. Super popular at fairs. You can make them whilst the client waits if they fancy one in a size that you don't already have. It's a veritable garden's worth of daisy rings, each one just 6 inches of wire, and it really doesn't take much more than 5 minutes or so. The reason the video is slightly longer than 5 minutes is because I'm a bit of a chatty Cathy. Anyway, thanks so much for watching today. If you have enjoyed the content, please do like today's video, subscribe to the channel. None of this costs you any money. I spend a day every single week creating content for YouTube, and the only way that I will be seen by the wider community is if my lovely viewers leave me likes and make sure you're subscribed to the channel too. Don't forget that you can share the content with your friends on social media. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.